Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today to hear more about joining a nonprofit board. I'm the executive director and founder of nonprofit BoardAssist. My name is Cynthia Remick, and I'm thrilled you're going to be with us for a short while this morning to learn more about joining a nonprofit board. One of the numbers you're going to hear me say repeatedly over the next few minutes is 1.8 million. That's the number of nonprofit board seats that open up in this country every year. Once you understand that, you'll understand that this talk is about finding the perfect board seat for you. You can be very selective, and you should be very selective. If you find a board that's serving in the exact interest area that matters the most to you, you'll be the most effective board member that you can be. So it's really, really important as you're thinking about joining a board to understand that number 1.8 million, which you're going to get very tired of me saying over and over, because that's the number that highlights that this process is in your hands, and what should you be thinking about to make sure that you're picking the board that's perfect for you. On the BoardAssist website, which you can find at boardassist.org, on the top of every page there's a frequently asked questions tab. If you click on that tab, you'll find our book, Giving Back. Everything I'm going to say today is found in section 2 of that book. So if you can't sit through this entire talk, or you just prefer to read it quickly rather than listen to me, you can find everything I'm going to say in section 2 of that book, and we invite you to download it for free at your leisure from the top of every page of our website. 2 minutes on BoardAssist before we dive in. BoardAssist is the leading personalized nonprofit board matching service in the Northeast, and we are a nonprofit ourselves. Nonprofits and nonprofit board candidates come to us and ask us to find them a fit with, on the candidate side, a board that's going to really resonate with them, where they can serve in a leadership role and really engage. We're very proud of the fact that over 90% of the people that we place on boards every year are serving as leaders on the boards where we place them within 24 months of being placed. On the nonprofit side, nonprofits come to us and say, we really need some help growing our board. We have a fabulous board, but everyone's retiring down to Florida, and we don't have anybody who is young and is going to be the next generation. Or we have a terrific board, but we don't have anybody on our board who matches with the demographic we're serving. Our board is all white, but the consumers we're serving are all African Americans. Our board is all women, but the consumer demographic we're serving is all young men. So that's what we're here to help the nonprofits with, is find those people who are going to fill the hole that they have. Maybe we have a terrific board, but nobody wants to read our financials. We have a terrific board, but nobody knows anything about social media. So the nonprofits come to us and tell us what the holes that they have on their board are and ask us to help. And on the candidate side, as we go through this talk today, you'll see the candidates will come to us and tell us exactly what would be of most interest to them, and then we match the two. And we'll talk about that later at the very end of this talk. The important thing for you to know as you're listening to this is I'm here today to try and help you go through this process on your own if you're not working through BoardAssist, and give you a few tips that'll help you find the perfect match if you're working on your own. If you're working through us, we're going to be holding your hand through this process, and it'll be easier for you to see how this will all make sense. If you're navigating this process on your own, hopefully the tips that we give you today will give you all the skills that you need to make sure you make a great long-term fit, because that's our goal. We want to make sure you join a board, love the board so much you tell 3 of your friends to join a board. Going back to that 1.8 million number, we need you to join a board. We need you to tell all your friends to join a board. And so it's really important you make a great board fit. And for selfish reasons, we really want to see that that happens. So as we quickly go through what you should be thinking about as you're thinking about what board would be the right board for you. In general, what you should be thinking about, it's the mission of the organization, how much time you have to give to board service, how engaged you want to be, where the organization is located in terms of where they provide their services, but also where you'll be meeting, what the financial commitment is that will be expected of you, the age and the budget of the nonprofit, what the fit is for you with the executive director, and what the fit is for you with the rest of the board. So as we think about mission, there are actually more items to consider than you might realize. Do you want to join a nonprofit that's working in an area that's complementary to your job? Or do you perhaps want to call on some past experience in your life? Maybe you're a lawyer and you're really interested in helping folks who can't afford lawyers access legal rights. Or maybe you were in the Salvation Army in Africa before you went to business school and you'd really like to get back to doing something helping people in Africa. Or maybe you were in a rock band when you were in college and you'd really like to help kids in inner city schools that don't have music programs access music. Are you interested in joining a board that has one issue, or is it a multi-service agency that would be more interesting for you? So you may be someone who cares a lot about literacy, and you're very interested in joining a literacy board, but perhaps all the literacy boards that we're working with at any point in time are relatively small organizations with a budget of $1 to $2 million a year. And we may be working with an organization that we can tell you about that has a $100 million a year budget, and $10 million of that $100 million budget is focused on a literacy program they run. So sometimes it can be interesting, even if you are focused on a very specific issue, to join a larger organization that has a really large presence with that one area that is of the most interest to you. Think about the age of the consumers that you want to serve. Again, going back to that 1.8 million number, do you only want to work with children? Do you only want to work with elementary school children? Do you only want to work with girls who are between 10th and 12th grade? Do you only want to work with seniors? So think about the age of the consumers that you want to serve, and think about the ethnicity of the consumers you want to serve. It may be that you come from a Latina background and you're really interested in serving young Latina girls, or there might be some other specific ethnic group that you're very focused on supporting. Given how many nonprofit boards will be interested in you, there's really no reason for you not to laser focus on the age of the people you want to serve, the demographics, their ethnicity, whatever those things are that are going to resonate most with you and make you care most about the consumers that you're serving. You should go through that self-evaluation, figure out who you want to serve, and then hone in on those boards that are serving exactly that demographic that's most interesting to you. You should spend a lot of time thinking about time. This is one of the biggest reasons a board fit might fall apart, is that you had in your mind how much time you were able to devote to board service, and the board had a different number in their head. So as you're thinking about how much time you have to give the board that you're going to join, if you're working through BoardAssist, we're going to have pulled out for you, before we present any board idea to you, exactly how often the board meets, at what time of day, and where they're located. What you should be thinking about if you're doing this on your own or working through us is, how much time do you have to devote to board service? Is it better for you to be attending board meetings in the morning, at lunch, in the evenings? Does this board ask you to serve on a committee? Most boards do. So if you're navigating this process solo, be sure to ask, how often does the board meet? How often do the committees meet? And here's a very important one. Make sure to ask whether you can phone into these board meetings and committee meetings. Now, because you're going to be very desirable as you're out there talking to boards, because of that 1.8 million number, everyone's going to need you and everyone's going to be really excited to have you on their board. If you ask, I'm a busy person, can I call into meetings? The answer you're almost definitely going to get is yes, that's no problem whatsoever. Push back on that and say, that's terrific, I really appreciate that. Do others phone in as well? Would I be the only one phoning in? Because if you are the only one phoning in, you're not going to develop the kind of camaraderie that you need with the rest of the board to move your initiatives forward. So we would recommend against joining a board where you'll be the only one phoning in. So be sure to ask that question. If lots of other people phone in, and a lot of charter schools, for example, do a lot of their work by phone. Charter schools are legally required to meet monthly, and that's a heavy lift for most busy New Yorkers to attend board meetings monthly. So a lot of the charter schools do hold their board meetings by video conference, and so that might be fine, but be sure and ask that question. level of engagement is something that you really want to be thinking about. Most people, when they come to BoardAssist, or if you're joining a board on your own, are joining a board because they really want to be an engaged leader on the board. If you were just going to write a check and didn't want to give any of your time and just wanted to give your money, you probably wouldn't join a board. You just make a donation. So if you're going on a board, it's probably because you really want to be able to engage and be an agent of change with that organization. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. I don't think anyone has ever come to us and said, I'd love to join a board. Can you find one where I don't have to go to meetings and I don't have to do anything? Instead, people come to me and say, I'd really love to join a board, and I just want to make sure, even though I'm prepared to be generous financially, that my primary gift is going to be the intellectual capital that I'm donating to the organization. And that's what we're here to do, and that's why we're very proud that over 90% of our placements are serving as leaders within 12 months of being placed. That's what we're striving towards. If you're working on this process on your own, you need to push really hard in the board interview process on how you're going to be able to engage other than just write a check. Because that's one of the biggest reasons board matches fall apart is you join a board and you think you're going to be able to get really engaged and really make a difference, and you start to get the sense the board just wants your money. So if you're working with us, we're going to work really hard to make sure that doesn't happen. If you're navigating this on your own, you want to push back on that as you're talking to board members in the interview process. One of the great questions that we suggest that you ask when you're interviewing is, give me 3 examples of things that board members have done in the last 12 months that have not involved capital raising. If the 3 examples they give you are, well, one board member held a cocktail at their home and another board member got 12 computers donated from their company, that was all about capital raising. Every person that you meet in this process, whether it's the executive director or another board member, should be able to really quickly answer that question of what have people done besides just raise capital in the last 12 months. And based on how they answer that question, you'll get a firm sense of how engaged you can be. Location may be something that seems very obvious, but it's another make or break thing with your board experience. If the organization is holding meetings in a location that don't work for you, the board fit is probably not going to be a great one. So think about, do you want to meet uptown, downtown, midtown? If a nonprofit's located in the South Bronx, don't necessarily write that off quickly. It may be that the board chair's office is located in the same office where you work, and you can take the elevator to the board meetings rather than having to go to the South Bronx at noon 6 times a year. So find out early in the process, not just where the organization offers their services, but where the organization holds their board meetings and their committee meetings. And be sure to be thinking about that question about phoning in, which we talked about earlier. Financial commitment is probably one of the most important things that you really want to drill down on if you're doing this on your own. If you're working through BoardAssist, we're going to pull out from every nonprofit that asks for our help how much money are you required to personally give, raise from others, that's called the GET, and are they interchangeable? So if you're working on your own, at your first meeting, I would even argue before you take the first meeting with the board, you should ask for a written confirmation of what will be expected of you, both in terms of your give and your get, and whether they're interchangeable. As I said, if you're working through us, we're going to have pulled that out for you. Most organizations that we support ask for at least $5,000 of give plus get. We have a few that ask for less. We have a few that ask for more. In New York City, $5,000's just about the norm, the average, but as I said, it goes all over the place. We talk a lot about this in section 2 of our book, which I directed you to at the beginning of this talk, and we have a lot of numbers there that you may want to review. But basically, the important thing on give and get is to understand what you're personally responsible for and what you're responsible for getting. So they're not necessarily interchangeable, which is a little counterintuitive unless you work in the nonprofit governance space. For example, you may join a board where they're asking you to give plus get $5,000 a year. And you may come on that board and say, you know, I really don't like asking friends for money, so I'm just going to write a check for $5,000 the first day and be done with it. That actually may not work, surprisingly. Some nonprofits say, you know, that's so great that you were so generous and we really appreciate it. but we expect board members to be bringing in new money from new sources. So it's not enough for you to write that entire check yourself. We really want to see that you bring in people, other new sources of funding. So if you're doing this on your own, be sure to ask, can you just write the entire check yourself, or is there a get piece? Be sure to also ask on the get piece, what are all the sources of get that you are responsible for? Do you have to sell journal ads to the benefit? Do you have to buy a gala table? What are all the different things that are expected? And get this in writing, and then keep this in your files so that if there's an issue a year or two down the road and you thought you were doing a great job and you were meeting everything that was asked of you, and a new board chair comes on and has a different expectation, you can point to, when I joined, this is what I was told was expected of me, and I would like to think that I've met those expectations, because nobody wants to join a board and disappoint everyone. Another thing that's a little counterintuitive is, in addition to the fact that you can't necessarily write the full check, you can't necessarily raise the full check. So maybe you join a board and the expectation is that you get $5,000 a year, and the first month that you're on the board, your employer decides to write a $5,000 check to that organization. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're off the hook. Again, if you're working through us, we'll pull out the difference between give and get and whether they're interchangeable. If you're doing this on your own, some organizations would say, that's so great that you brought that money in, but we need to see that you personally gave money and it wasn't all your corporation or your employer giving the money, but that you personally cared about our organization and you personally wrote a check. Those are very important things to be thinking about. You want to be thinking about the age and the budget of the nonprofit. You want to work with an organization that's a small startup nonprofit or one of the largest names in New York City. A lot of people think if you join a large established nonprofit, there won't be much to do, they're so large and everything is running so well, it's not going to be a meaningful board seat. We actually find that that's not the case. We find that a lot of times if you're joining a really large, well-established organization, because they are so well-organized, they figured out how to engage the board, and they really do a great job of providing a very meaningful board experience. And one of the pluses of joining a large organization is if you have a terrific idea, there's 5,000 employees there who are able to then work on executing that great new plan that you came up with. So a lot of people are more comfortable with the idea of joining a startup organization. As I said, they think they'll be more hands-on that way. When you think about joining a startup organization, think about the fact that there will be nobody else there potentially to execute these great ideas you have. So you may have a great idea for a terrific new social media plan, but they just don't have the resources to move that plan forward. So that could get frustrating, or it could be terrific. You're adding a tremendous amount of value, and a lot of times in a small organization, the board essentially functions as the staff. That might be exactly what you're looking for, and that's terrific. But really think hard of, if you're somebody who works for a company with 20,000 employees and you join the board of an organization with 2 employees, is that going to be frustrating for you, or is that going to be really exciting and a great departure from what you do during the day? So if it's a large organization, one other thing is those do tend to be the ones where there is a lot of emphasis on fundraising. So push back, as we discussed earlier, on what board members do besides fundraise. Keeping in mind, though, often with a small nonprofit, they really think the sole goal of the board is to fundraise. So you want to be pushing back with everyone you talk to. What am I going to get to do other than just write checks? We've had some tiny organizations come to us and expect every board member to give $50,000 a year. And then we've had organizations that are some of the biggest household names in New York City come to us and say board members only need to give $1,000 a year. That's a surprise to a lot of people. There isn't an exact correlation between the size of the nonprofit and how much money you're expected to generate every year. A lot of the largest boards in New York City ask for very small donations because they're up and running and they're in great shape, and some of the smallest ones can ask for a very large donation. So partnering with the executive director is something that is very, very important to think about as you're going down this path. Going back to that 1.8 million number, you're going to be very desirable as you're out talking to organizations. And so you should pick an organization that really resonates with you and the time is right and the money is right. But one of the most important things to ask yourself is, do I really want to work with this executive director? When I met them, did I like them? Did they inspire me? Somebody said to me years ago, joining a board through BoardAssist is a little bit like picking a puppy at the pet store. I met with 3 executive directors. I wanted to take them all home with me. I love them so much. So we're doing our job right when you're confused at the end of this process, because every executive director you met is somebody you want to partner with. And I don't care how much you love the mission and how much everything else is perfect. If you meet the executive director and you're not incredibly inspired by that person, then it's not the right board. In addition to being inspired by them, look at their management style. When you send them an email, does it take them 3 days to respond? This is the phase during which they're courting you. If it's taking 3 days to respond to emails during this courting phase, it's not going to be any quicker once you're on the board. I would argue it's probably more likely it's going to take even longer for the executive director to respond to your emails. If you're someone who works at a place where emails have to be returned on a same-day basis and ideally within the hour, you might get really frustrated no matter how much you like that executive director working with someone whose management style is so different than yours. So in the interview process, take a good look at their management style, and in addition to whether you like the person on a personal note and feel inspired by them, do you think that you'll work well with them? Take a look at how the executive director works with the board. You'll be going to interviews where there'll likely be the executive director there and a few board members. See how they talk to each other. See how they work together. Lots of times everything is perfect, but you start to get the sense that the executive director and the board don't partner well together, and it's going to be very difficult to accomplish something if you join a board where there isn't a good relationship between the board and the executive director, and that does happen. Take a strong look at the background of that executive director. Is this somebody who's been in the job for 20 years and maybe they're not going to be super open to change? They've been doing the same things the same way for 20 years and things are going well in their mind and they really appreciate that you want to support the organization, but they're really not open to doing things differently. Or sometimes some of the best executive directors have been in the job forever and are very open to change and are very open to engaging the board. But take a look at how long that person's been in the job. Take a look at what their background is. You may look at their background and say, I understand that person's background. It's very similar to mine. I spent 10 years in the Salvation Army before I went off to McKinsey or to law school or whatever I'm doing, and I think I'd partner really well with that person based on their background. See where they are in their life cycle with the organization. So, one opportunity that people always love, and it's one of the most fun things that you can do, is joining a board where the executive director has been there for 30 years, is now stepping down, and you're going to be part of the team that finds the new executive director and then works with this new person. That's almost always very, very fun, because then you really are impacting the organization and likely to affect a lot of change. Finally, take a good look at the board culture. This whole process of serving on a board should be fun for you. This should be something that you really look forward to doing. Spending time with the executive director, spending time with the organization, spending time with the other board members. It's terrific that you, as a busy New Yorker, are finding time to give back. And the nonprofit community really appreciates that. But it's okay that you're going to have a little bit of fun too, develop some new skills, maybe do a little networking, and meet some terrific people. So it's fair and smart to take a look at who else is on the board. Is this a group that you want to spend time with? When you had coffee with 3 of the board members, did you enjoy their company? Were they people who you felt you could work well with? Take a look at what their backgrounds are. Most boards now do a pretty great job of listing everybody who's on their board and where they work, and often have a full bio on each board member. If you're working through us, we're going to have that information. If you're doing this on your own and the organization has a name but they don't have a full bio on that person, LinkedIn is a terrific tool. You can just look everybody up on LinkedIn and see what their background is, see how long everyone's been on the board, and that could be a good proxy for you trying to determine the board culture. Don't be rushed through this process. Make sure that you get to meet people on the board. It's very possible you'll go for one interview with the executive director. You'll love the executive director. She'll love you. She'll give you a board offer. And at that point, you have to say, that's so great. I'm really glad that there's so much enthusiasm for me joining the team, but I really would like to meet members of the board as well. Make sure, for example, you definitely want to meet, at a minimum, the board chair. I don't care how many other board members you meet. You need to meet the board chair. That's going to be a very important part of the equation of whether you're happy with the board. Ask about the board turnover rate. This is a great question to ask. There may be a very legitimate reason why 90% of the board has stepped down in the last 12 months. We worked with a board where everybody on the board was over 90 years old, so everybody was stepping down at the same time. They had not done any succession planning, and when they approached us, they said, we don't have anybody on the board who walks into the board meetings. I was a little puzzled by what that meant. What that meant was everybody either came with a nurse that was walking them in or with a walker. So there are boards that are just very happily working together for 30, 40 years, that they don't think about the next step, and so you're now coming in at a time when they're rebuilding the full board. But a lot of times there isn't a great reason for a high board turnover. So you definitely want to ask about that board turnover rate. And if the number is high, why is it so high? What happened? Ask, why is the board adding now? If you're looking at an organization that's got 30 board members, why does it need 5 more board members? Typically, if a board is a large board and it's still adding, that's because they're looking for financial resources from the board, and that can be a warning sign that this is a board we're going to be able to engage less and largely be fundraising or friend-raising. But that's not always the case, and it's very legitimate to say, you have 30 board members, why do you need more right now? And they may say, yes, we have a terrific board, but we don't have anybody that knows anything about social media, so we need that social media board member, or we don't have anybody that knows anything about marketing. Everybody on the board's a lawyer. We need somebody that knows something about marketing. So ask why they're adding at this time, and take a very good look at the credentials of the board chair specifically. As I said, you may meet several board members like everybody you meet, and then you quickly meet the board chair at the end, and they seem like a very nice person, and you think it's going to be a great fit. But take a look at their background and their credentials, because they're the ones who are going to be driving the organization to a large extent, and if they don't look like they're qualified to be serving in that role, that might be frustrating. I served on a board where there were a lot of terrific people on the board. There was the McKinsey partner, there was the law firm partner, there were all these fabulous people, and the only person who wasn't as well credentialed as the others on the board was the board chair, and she was a very, very nice person, and she was the one who had time to be the board chair, but she was the least credentialed person on the board, and the board meetings would sort of start with a half an hour talk of her talking about her latest vacation to Italy, and although it was very interesting to hear that, at the end of the day, she wasn't really the best person to be chairing the board, and she was the reason I ultimately stepped off that board. If you're working with us, please know you can be very, very direct about board culture. It's totally fine to say, I work in the media industry and I'd really like to join a board that has several senior people from the media industry in it. That'd be very helpful for me from a networking point of view. We had one woman who approached us and said, my husband recently died. I'd like to join a board that has a lot of single men. That was a little harder for us. We don't really know who's single on any board that we're working with, but we tried. But the point is, please feel free to be honest with us about who you'd like to be on the board with, because we're here to make sure it's a very positive experience for you, for the selfish reason that we want you to love your board experience and tell all your friends to go on boards, whether they work through BoardAssist or they do it on their own. Finally, a few minutes on the board matching process. If you've lasted till this long, I would one final time remind you that everything I've said today is found in section 2 of our book, which you can download from the frequently asked questions tab of every page of our website, boardassist.org. We would love to hear from you, and you can email us at info@boardassist.org. With that out of the way, some final thoughts on the board matching process. Once you've formed your initial search criteria, what we would typically suggest if you're working through us or on your own is that you talk to at least 3 boards. The first organization you meet with, you're almost definitely going to like, and they're almost definitely going to like you, and you'll think you're done. But after you've met 2 or 3 boards, you're going to start to see, I thought I really liked that first executive director, but the third person was so inspirational, and that's really the person I want to be with. So unless you really go through that process of talking to 2 or 3 boards for comparison, you may, in the long run, have cheated yourself out of finding that perfect board fit. Now, so an exception to the rule of talking to 2 or 3 boards for comparison is an organization. Sometimes somebody will come to us and there'll be some sort of a family illness like leukemia or multiple sclerosis in the family, and you'll be very focused on, I don't really care if this is the perfect board fit. This disease matters so much to me and my family. This is where I want to help. And so, there are situations where you wouldn't want to go through that process. But I do think in general, it's a great rule to talk to 2 or 3 boards for a comparison. As I mentioned before, make sure at a minimum that you meet the board chair and the executive director. Those are 2 really important people that are going to impact whether you have a great board fit. And keep in mind that at the end of all this, because of that 1.8 million number, which you heard me say way too often, you're probably going to end up with several board offers. If you're working with us, we're going to be there to hold your hand and help you figure out which organization is the one that you want to serve with. Warning, we do often have people go through the process and end up choosing 2 or even 3 boards at the end because they've fallen in love with all 3 organizations. But if you only have the time to devote to one organization, we're going to be here to help you. We have taken notes along the way of all the things you said as you were coming out of meetings with people. And we'll have, in most cases, we will have built most of the board that you're interviewing with, so we'll know the other personalities on the board, and we'll know whether those placements have been happy on the board and whether it's going to be a good fit for you. So I can't thank you enough for considering board service. It's so incredibly rewarding. What you do as a board member is so important to the nonprofit community. I really appreciate that you took the time to listen to what I had to say today, and I wish you great luck in your board search process and hope that you find that perfect board fit.